You are watching History Rewired, the channel where reality bends and the impossible becomes our playground. One man's existence changed the course of the 20th century. But what if he never existed at all? It means more than anything to have an audience this size that cares about these alternate history explorations. So, to celebrate, here's a special week of videos, each asking one simple what-if question. What if Ivan the Terrible had eaten a Snickers before beating his son to death? What if Genghis Khan accidentally pressed the self-destruct button on his time machine and got sent back to present-day Mongolia? Or what if Julius Caesar had worn a helmet while getting stabbed by a bunch of senators? Okay, maybe those aren't the best questions ever, but they are fun. And the point is to explore just how fragile history really is, how small differences can make big changes over time. And today, we tackle perhaps the biggest butterfly flapping incident in all of recent history. One that might have spared millions of lives and changed our world in ways we can barely fathom. Let's talk about Hitler. You probably know his story. After a disappointing adolescence, he bounced around Europe trying to be an artist. Failed at that. Turned to politics. Specifically German nationalist politics that blamed Jews and other minorities for Germany's problems. He joined the German Workers' Party and quickly became its leader, changing its name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi for short. His goal was simple: to take over Germany and then take over the world. By 1933, he achieved the first part of that goal and began immediately to implement his insane agenda. Passing anti-Jewish laws, building up the military, and preparing for war. In 1939, he got what he wanted. France and Britain declared war on Germany after it invaded Poland. World War II had begun. The war would last 6 years and result in an estimated 70 to 85 million deaths. Hitler oversaw the systematic genocide of European Jews, also known as the Holocaust, which resulted in the murder of roughly 6 million people. His ideology would inspire similar nationalist movements across the globe and lead directly to the start of the Cold War. He also inadvertently kicked off a massive race for new technologies like computers, rockets, and nuclear weapons. Had he never lived, it's impossible to say exactly what would have happened. But we can try! For simplicity's sake, let's just assume that Hitler is our one historical domino. Everything else was always going to happen anyway. Let's see what removing that one piece does to the rest of the board. First things first. Does Germany still go to war without Hitler? Probably. Yes. Even without Der Führer, the harsh terms of the Versailles Treaty, which ended World War I. We're still brewing resentment and anti-communist sentiment in Germany. There was still a severe economic depression and growing nationalism throughout Europe. Maybe a different German leader takes over and creates a similar nationalist cult around themselves. Maybe the country doesn't descend into totalitarianism and fascism, but another form of government emerges. Regardless, even without Hitler, there's a good chance World War II still happens in some form or another. It's simply too big of a war with too many powerful countries involved. But there's also a chance that without Hitler, World War II either happens much later or doesn't happen at all in the same way. Either way, though, we have fundamentally changed history for the better immediately. No more rounding up of Jews in the middle of the night. No more gas chambers. No more mass graves. Millions upon millions of people live out their lives. But to really see the massive ripple effects of this change, you have to look further down the timeline. Next up, 1945, because Hitler didn't do any of the stuff that he did. Does Germany lose World War II? Almost certainly. With no Nazi party, it's likely that Germany falls relatively quickly after being invaded. Britain and France probably still want revenge for World War I, and the Soviet Union is still hungry for warm water ports. Germany doesn't come out of this war nearly as badly. They still lost, but they don't lose territory, money, and prestige like they do in our timeline. This has broader implications as well. Without Hitler's genocidal tendencies, the Holocaust doesn't happen. 6 million Jews live through World War II and head into the latter half of the century as survivors. Not only does this shift the balance of power in the Middle East, it shifts global culture forever. We have to remember that the Jewish diaspora is massive, containing people from all over the world and from all walks of life. Removing the Holocaust permanently changes the demographics of countless communities and countries. Jewish people who survived the Holocaust in our timeline went on to win Nobel Prizes, become senators, prime ministers, CEOs, and astronauts. They've contributed to every facet of modern society. And now, all those people are gone. So too is the State of Israel, which was created in 1948 partly as a refuge for Jewish people fleeing persecution in Europe. But more on that in a bit. And speaking of a nation rising from the ashes, the United States is very different without the Second World War. Sure, it still exists, but the nature of the country itself is entirely different. It comes out of World War II battered, bruised, and broke. It spends the latter half of the century as a second-rate power behind the Soviet Union and China. The Great American Century doesn't happen. Instead, the British remain a major player on the world stage for much longer, along with the French and Dutch. The US doesn't become a technological powerhouse because did UN kick off the race for new innovation? During World War II, without the need to develop new weapons and computers and long-range bombers, the US lags behind its European counterparts for decades. Perhaps it eventually catches up, but without the war's urgency, it has. Hard to say if it ever reaches the heights of the space race and the moon landing. Maybe it never becomes the world leader in entertainment or fashion. Maybe it falls further behind Europe in education and quality of life. And the Soviet Union, well, it's hard to say how it's affected by a timeline where Hitler never rose to power. But something tells me that Stalin probably still murders anyone he feels threatened by and probably still invades Poland, which probably still enrages Germany enough to join the fight. Could the Soviets spread as far as they do in our own timeline? Or does the fact that Germany doesn't collapse mean the Soviets never reached their peak power in the 1950s? But perhaps the most important thing to consider is whether or not the Cold War even happens at all. If Stalin is facing a strong post-war Germany and a vengeful Britain and France, he may not feel confident enough to launch his communist revolution across Europe. But if he does, it's likely that a united Western Front stops him dead in his tracks. As Winston Churchill said, we shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And that kind of resolve isn't easily broken. The end result of all of this is a very different map of the world in 1991. As we know it, the Soviet Union collapses into 15 independent republics and the Cold War ends soon after. Without the events of World War II, the Soviet Union may not collapse in the same way. Its constituent republics may remain separate for longer, or maybe the Russian Federation absorbs them all and becomes even stronger. But either way, the world's divided, and neither side is called America or the USSR. As we end this episode, I'd like you to think about something. A lot of this episode was hypothetical. It was extrapolating a little too far from what would actually happen if Hitler never lived. But the point is still valid. One missing life can reshape billions. Do you think Hitler's rise to power was inevitable? Was he a product of his environment and circumstances? Or was he truly a unique accident? Let me know your thoughts. Next up, we ask, what if Ivan the Terrible ate a Snickers before beating his son to death? But before we get to that, thank you again for watching the video. It means the world to me, and it's thanks to your likes, comments, and shares that I can keep making these videos. So please take a moment to show your support. See you next time!